you brought that piece in. So,
Yeah.
emojis as pleasure practice.
Yeah, that too.
Great.
We're here.
Ooh, we're here. So, take her away. Where
Take
are we
it
going?
away. Where are we going today? Yeah. So yeah, thanks for wanting to meet with me. I know it's been a while since we've been talking about it quite a lot, so I'm happy to meet you here today and talk about pleasure, our solo pleasure practices. Yeah. And whoever's joining us, please feel free to pop questions in. We'll do our best to get to them. And don't gotta, but it'd be awesome to get something going, some questions.
Yeah. Do you have pleasure practices?
Yeah.
Are you curious about what they are? What do you name a pleasure practice? How do you get one started? All the questions. Let us know.
Yeah. Got some other folks here. Okay, so I'm wondering if you would like to get started. Like, you could ask me a question. I'm happy to dive in.
Yeah. I've been curious about, we get into these worlds, whatever they may be. Let's say this one is somatic sexuality, and as practitioners, and we learn these lingos, and then they become kind of like regular vernacular for us, and we can forget that the rest of the world doesn't have this vernacular and the shared language. So I'm curious, like, when you came to the term pleasure practice as a part of this work in particular, as somatic sex educators and sexological body workers, like, how did you relate to that phrasing to begin with, much less before you even kind of maybe picked it up for yourself?
Yeah. So it kind of actually solidified it. It created a practice, like a name, a term for something that I was already doing. It's just something that I guess maybe not daily back then, but I, would find time for myself to tap into, like my wellness, my spiritual wellness. And it was just a matter of like, masturbation is one way, right? Just like creating space every day for that time to be with the self. And I think that particular practice started when I was quite young. It started when I was like, I don't know, tween age, 13, 14, where I discovered my erotic pleasure, and I thought it would be wonderful to do that like 2 or 3 times a day. And it became like a grounding force for me and a real I don't know, like it was just the thing that I did for myself, and I got to know my body really well, and it was an opportunity to kind of energize my day. So yeah, that's a little bit of insight, and I'm wondering if I can reflect that question back to you, if you'd like to go into that, your answer around that.
Yeah, I feel like it feels really complex, the living of that history in me, because I kept trying to find my way to self-pleasure as a teenager, and just I wasn't finding it. I was like, this is nice. I don't get it. It's kind of like dating men. I was like, well, this is nice. I don't get it. For me, it wasn't until I started dating non-cis men that I was like, oh no, this is great. Okay, like, that's nice, but this is great. And then I had more access to my body, because I just generally had more access to understanding what eroticism was. Before that, I remember looking at, like, I had both a copy of a Playboy and a Playgirl magazine, and I remember, like, physically enjoying both of these magazines, and also knowing that I was relating to them differently.
Yeah.
And not necessarily like more or less, because I figured out later, like, oh, I don't really like the airbrushed, all pretty and Momo and Becca.
Hello.
I figured out, like, oh, I don't really like the pretty dominantly white, like, airbrushed. That doesn't do it for me as far as vulva owners go. So I was like, oh no, that's nice, and also, And the men's one, I wasn't erotically turned on in the way that I ended up being with other people, but I did like the visuals more, which now I I look like a man, and so that makes sense to me. I'm like, oh, I see. Yes, I was attracted to that in a different way then. So yeah. So I didn't really think of those as like pleasure practices, and I didn't really masturbate a lot, and I didn't have a lot of access to orgasms for most of my life. But I did find BDSM. But I wouldn't have called that necessarily a pleasure practice. It was more of a pain and pleasure practice that I enjoyed. So finding pleasure, the term pleasure practice, I was like, well, that seems one-sided. It's actually like, we want like a healthy nervous system is one that stretches, right? And same thing is just that I was like, well, yes, pleasure, and also, what if you find pleasure from discomfort? How do we name that? Because it is different than what I feel like we are often talking about in these circles with other practitioners. I feel like pain and discomfort and the enjoyment of these things, not always, but so often gets left by the wayside. So I was a little reticent to the word pleasure practice. I was like, I mean, obviously that's important. Like a big bell hooks fan, like yes towards the erotic, and also what you name erotic and what I name erotic may or may not feel like quote unquote pleasure. And then also remembering that, oh, I get to define what the term pleasure means for me in my body, and that can include that full stretch. And once I got to that place, I was like, oh, well, all right, each of us define for our own, and moving on. So Charlotte and Chris,
yay, pleasure mechanics. Awesome. I appreciate that, Sharon. I think that, I mean, that leads me into thinking about like sensuality and, like bringing the pain and the pleasure into that. Like they're all sensations, or maybe they're sensation based. So I think for me, there's a fine line between pain and pleasure. And I can also get a lot of pleasure from experiencing pain or intense sensations. So I'm wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because I like this direction.
Ooh. I think between survival sex work and a lot of trauma of loss, I just didn't have a lot of access to pleasure that didn't include some kind of intense sensation. Like I just didn't have that for so long. Like it was like, oh, that's nice. Feel free to continue. I'm gonna take a nap. And I still have a bent towards overwhelm. Like that is my happiest place for sure. Like meet my nervous system where it actually fucking is, which is way up here most of the time, and I now have more elasticity and really enjoy without that. But for me, the need for so many years to have extreme sensations, that was my access point to getting to softer sensations, more gentle sensations, and pleasure generally. Again, what do we name as that, right? For me, it was all these things. So what is your access point? I think is such a huge thing. Like always just figuring out, like, I don't know, where's your nervous system is, like, where is it, and how do we meet it? And what are your access points, and how do we enjoy the fuck out of that? So, and then if we find more along the way, great. No summer, well.
Love that. Yay. Thank you. So we're talking about creating solo pleasure practices, and I'm curious, what's popping up for me is like, how do you set yours up, and how do you kind of enter into that space?
Oh. It varies on the type of pleasure practice, right? Like I have pleasure practices that for me are not sexual based, but are erotic based. Like shaving for me, I've turned into a pleasure practice because I never wanted to look like a man in the world. And so I really struggle having to walk outside my house every fucking day. Obviously I could shave my face. It doesn't change the fact that people think I'm a man. So instead, I'm enjoying the fact that I actually like what it looks like on my face, even if I don't like the consequences in the world. So I have a pleasure practice of shaving, where I really love a safety razor, the old-fashioned safety razors. and I have like a sandalwood
Mm.
soap that I really enjoy, and I like the boar brush, and like I just make a thing of it, and it's very sensory, and that feels very erotic to me. To take that time and space, and it is very much like, for me, setting the stage is so important. Like the mood in my body, am I up for that journey?
Yeah.
Setting up my bathroom in such a way that I like, which includes the lighting, often includes music. Making sure I'm not rushed is a big deal. So the sensory pieces, I think, in the stage setting is what allows me to like go more fully into these things. And then same thing with, I mean, even if I'm doing like, you know, a maintenance jack off, I still take the time to like put out a blanket that I don't have to worry about the mess I make. You know, I still take the time to turn on even a single song that I know I'm going to enjoy. I shift the lighting in my room, like just taking the like 45 seconds actually it takes to do those little things, boom, 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 boom. Then I know for the next 15 minutes, if I'm doing a quickie, I'm really gonna fucking enjoy it a little bit more, you know? So I think for me, it's the knowing the things that I need to set me up for success.
Yeah. Just gonna read in here. Appreciate hearing that. And we got a comment saying, been adjusting the lighting and music for my showers, which are hard for me and are turning into a pleasurable activity.
Yes, to that reclamation. Thank you for sharing that. Fuck
yeah, it's really important, like what you're saying, to set the scene, to set the container, and like music, fragrances, just like, and checking in with your overall energy. Like there's so much there that's really important to be able to tune into. So anyway. I also hate showers, so that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think noticing those little things that bug us, you know, like the tag in the back of my shirt, that the one that always itches, and cutting it sometimes makes it worse, right? So like, okay, going in with the seam ripper and getting that shit out so that I'm not bugged by it, because I actually like the shirt. Taking those little moments for ourselves, it's a big deal. That changes the whole day if you're not like, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Amazing. So we got another comment. I have a little dim light that's nice, and I don't dread showers anymore. Yeah, lighting.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Well done for yourself. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. So
what about you?
What about me?
Tell me more.
Well, I just want to say, like, I'm gonna stop for a minute and say, like, I'm experiencing so much pleasure, just being here and like connecting with you, and this shirt, like, I'm like really, you know, it's all about for me, like, sensations and how things feel, and you've gifted me this beautiful, colorful shirt that like has genitals and flowers all over it, and honestly, like, there's so much pleasure in the clothing that I wear. I'd like to choose like particular fabrics and particular like just, it's all about the sensation and how I feel held in my body. And so I wanted to note that I'm actually experiencing pleasure right now. Like, I kind of like to go through my day with like noticing those pieces that are pleasurable. So it's not even just specifically contained in a practice, but like, I think I like to bring that into my everyday and throughout the day, and noticing those pieces. So
yeah, that threading, the consistency, it builds on itself. So I think of it as like, if we have like all these tons of little tiny things that are bugging the shit out of us all the time, and then we have stressors come in, and then a big stressor comes in, like it just becomes such a pile. And when we like take the time to tend to the little things, then when the bigger stuff comes, which inevitably will, then there's not that like bed of thorns already to like fall into, you know? You're like, oh, I'm so glad I laid out the safety blanket.
Exactly. Can go right in. Yeah, I guess I could come back to like setting the stage for doing a pleasure practice. So I'm really into like having specific things. So I have a sheepskin rug that I really like to have under me. This like natural fiber, that texture is really beautiful for me. And also, yeah, music number one. Always like creating playlists, always coming up with the ones that give me that exact vibe of how I want to be in my body. And sometimes it's, sometimes it's like soft, flowy, chill, and other times it's like, like intense, like hardcore drum and bass or whatever. Like it's sometimes I need to really like jack up and have a lot of energy, and other times I just want to chill out. So it's nice to have a mix of different practices, different playlists for practices. Um, Another thing I like to do also is like come into my practice with movement. Like I have a hard time starting in stillness, so it's usually some sort of movement, some dance to the music that I've picked, and I try my best to start with like a self appreciation or body appreciation, and looking at the parts, like maybe I'm looking in the mirror, I'm like looking at the parts of myself that I'm like, oh yeah, I see you, and I really appreciate these parts, and like use my hands to kind of feel into uh, not just genitals, but like my whole being and body, like honoring those parts that are maybe needing it, needing a little extra attention. So it's really about not just like a going right into sensation also, but like just like those noticing moments and like really finding appreciation. So that's kind of how I start, and it's like I'm romancing myself,
Yes. Yes.
whatever that might look like. So in any given day. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so many reasons to romance ourselves. We know how to tell other people what we want. If we're really clear about it with ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we have more tools to be able to take care of ourselves when we're feeling a little like, a little protective or closed off. We're like, okay, I have some tools. I know some of the things that help me open up.
Yeah.
So, really important work.
Yeah.
I think especially as practitioners, to like walk the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's been so neat to, like go into our training and then recognize that like part of the foundation of our training was like having this like solid pleasure practice. And we were challenged to do like 30 days in a row to kind of like take that on and to try different things. And I mean, every single day my practice was different. And none of them were ever the same. And sometimes it would have been like like maybe genital stimulation or not. Sometimes it was a bath. Sometimes it, like journeying in through breath work. Sometimes, but like recognizing all the different ways of like creating a pleasure practice so that I can encourage that in others, So when I am working with clients, it's like, like finding threads of pleasure or whatever that is, or finding threads of just self-care and admiration, like how do you access that, and how can you spend like, even if it's just 5 minutes every day, so like having a bunch of like basically tools in the toolbox so that I can suggest or like say, well, this works for me, or this works for me, or this. So I feel like it's a never ending story.
Yeah, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I think on my Instagram you can find my 30 days. I ended up doing it with several other somatic sex educators and a sexuality therapist and a bunch of people. We all took like a week, and each of us did different prompts for different days, and then we did the thing together, which was so beautiful. And I'd love to do that again with practitioners. I think that would be a beautiful thing. And then beloved coaching. So Jess is right now doing is it liturgy, like for Lent, right?
Yeah,
for the 40 days, they do
instead
of denial, let's invite. And I fucking love it. I just think it's the sweetest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I usually make my kind of Lent redux like January 1st to February 7th when my birthday is. So I just kind of finished my like removal from. But then I love the idea of like, oh, maybe right after my birthday I'll go into an invitation to next year. So or I guess it started yesterday or today. Maybe I'll go ahead and jump in this year. Jump.
I love that you did that together, like you did the pleasure practices together with other somatic sex educators. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so it was 30 days, so we broke it into 4 weeks. And Chris with the Pleasure Mechanics took a week, and Susie here, who's a therapist, a creative arts therapist in Montreal, and Coda Rook, and myself. Oh, I feel like there was more because Florian also did a week. So anyway, a bunch of us did it.
Yeah.
And we each during that week, we had a theme. And I think mine was somatic gendering because I was dealing with this whole transformation.
Yeah.
And this was 2 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
And during that week, you gave a prompt to the audience, and then people could engage with it however they wanted. So, like, the prompt would go out in the morning, and then you'd have the day to engage with it however you want it. And people got really creative. Maybe I'm thinking Susie. No, they did a whole week. But yeah, it was really beautiful to like bounce off of each other and to feel like you really had a team.
Yeah.
In that effort.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, I know where you're heading, what you're moving to create.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. So Emmy, I just want to say the like doing Lent, even though not Christian. Hi.
Yeah.
Definitely that. Like for me, it's very much a reclamation. Yeah. And I think I know for Jess it is very much as well, which I just think is indeed gorgeous reclamation. So.
Yeah. How do we make these practices ours? You know, and reclaim things that have been taken from us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very that.
I love these shares.
Well, and that, I mean, thinking about doing the group pleasure practice, well, the individual pleasure practices in a group versus like what you're creating, the like literal group pleasure practices.
Yeah. So what about it? What are you thinking about?
I think start telling us. I think a lot of people don't know what that would look like or have assumptions about what that would look like. And maybe they're right, maybe they're not.
Yeah. Well, I guess it just depends on, you know, like doing, it really depends on where people are coming from. And so like, because I'm calling to other erotic practitioners and people that like I'm hoping already have a solid solo pleasure practice, what I'm hoping to create is maybe like an online community. I want to have an online community, and I also want to have an in real life, like live community. I want both of these things. And so the online community, which we have access to at any moment from anywhere in the world, I think it would be lovely to have a regular meeting point, you know, whether it's like a Friday afternoon delight or a Sunday evening, or, you know, like something where it's like a consistent place where we come in and we meet and we all get to like turn our cameras on and meet in a Zoom room and you know, like demonstrate that pleasure, whatever that is. And so it could be a mix. It could be maybe something guided. It might be something like a pleasure show and tell, where each person gets to show something and be seen in their pleasure. Or maybe it's like just an opportunity for us all to witness one another at the same time simultaneously. So we're kind of being drawn in and maybe being inspired by what it is that brings us pleasure, right? So I'm just like, I'm kind of open to whatever, and open to the, you know, the people that want to join and what do they want to test out and kind of flow into. Maybe there's a shared playlist, you know, maybe somebody comes in with an instrument and wants to play live music for us, like, you know. So I just have like so many things that I want to share, and so having, you know, like having like that meeting place and knowing that it's happening, and so then, you know, like I'm actually like thinking like, let's get started. How about next week, you know, like who wants to come? Friday afternoon delight, you know, and let's go for it. Yeah. So
yeah, it makes me think of like, so I'm not Buddhist, but I follow a lot of the teachings in my own life and my own queer way, and I do really deeply appreciate the importance of the three, and which also makes me think of the Holy Trinity, and also makes me think of the Triskelion, which has a long history way beyond BDSM, back to Egypt, and just these, you know, sacred geometry, but the importance of three, and in this instance, it's you have the Dharma, which is like, I think of it as like, okay, all of the theory around the erotic and liberatory praxis, and how do we make this into actionable reality in the world to cultivate change. And those understandings and the philosophy, and then you have the individual practice of sitting on the mat, which I think of as like our individual pleasure practices, whether they are sexual or not, doesn't matter. But like bell hooks version of the erotic. And then you have the Dharma, or I'm sorry, we have the Dharma, the individual, and then you have the Sangha, right? And you have the collective, the group effort, where you really get to feel held, and you get to have your own experience, but you know that you're interconnectedness, and you have that sense of rootedness. And I think that community pleasure practices give us that piece of the puzzle, and I think that that's so often missing. And especially in such a dominantly individualistic society, like we need to come back together. Moving to Montreal really was an eye-opener for me in that I was so used to collective erotic spaces. I mean, being like every week multiple choices to have collective erotic spaces, and then coming here and it's like hush hush, maybe there's like 2 parties a year, you know. And I was like, what the fuck? No wonder you're not well. This is vitally important to like our health. And so and the health of creating, I think, liberatory change is being able to share in these practices.
Absolutely.
You know, and this is a micro version that's very specific to the erotic, and obviously this applies to all the things that we're deconstructing and reconstructing. But anyway, that's my soapbox.
I love your soapbox.
So, yes to collective practices, please, more of that. So
and that's definitely like my kind of sangha. Like, you know, it's great to meditate with one another, but I actually feel quite bored in that. I mean, it has its place, but also like it's nice to be able to have create our own sangha, you know, and like really make it what we want it to be and what I've always dreamed it to be. So
and even within that, having deep refuge groups, you know, for those of us who are in different margins of the world than, let's say, the main free highway. Like, I'm a huge supporter of Queer Leather Sangha, you know, which is out of the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, and I'm so grateful that they're online still. That I can tap back into that twice a month, because to be able to sit in Sangha with people where I don't have to censor my queerness, certainly, or my transness, because there's other trans people in the room, and nor my BDSM, you know, in the way that I utilize subversion of power in my erotic practices. So that's huge. Sangha, Sangha. So it's like sitting in meditation in a group. And you can have different kind of specificities in those. So for me, the Queer Leather Sangha is the only one that I went to a whole bunch during the pandemic, and it's the only one that's persisted for me, because I don't have to worry about anybody. It's not just acceptance though, right? Because they're queer sanghas, and I enjoy those, and I can talk about BDSM, and I can talk about transness, but that doesn't mean other people engage with it, right? So that difference of like, this is available versus this is wanted, right? What a difference that makes.
I'm just gonna backtrack a bit. There was a question about y'all got any book recommendations for this? So maybe what you were talking about on your soapbox. I'm wondering if you can recall anything that there might be a resource or two that you can share.
I mean, just start, if you haven't, with Bell Hook's uses of the erotic, please. And there's a YouTube video of her actually sharing at, I think maybe it was in Berkeley or something, but please watch that if you haven't, even if you've read it. Like, so to me, that's a really strong starting point. I think that pleasure activism is a nice, like, contemporary, boiled down version of Black feminist liberation that is sex inclusive. BELL. Hooks, yes. So that would be another book that I would recommend. I could keep going. I'd have to go to my bookshelf, but
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Loving this.
Oh, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, not necessarily, and Lama Rod Owens,
Yeah.
even more so erotic, open. Reverend Angel is a black lesbian in Oakland, and talks very openly about many things. It's very like post-Buddhist, beautiful work, and she was a co-author for Radical Dharma, which is a good book also, actually, if you're interested in how to harness Eastern philosophies of Buddhist practice into this kind of stuff. But then Lama Rod Owens, very much like sit down in a sangha and he's like, okay, let's talk about Grinder. And you're just like, yes, sir, thank you. Like, the realities of our day to day. Like, reverence is beautiful and helpful, but not at the point where it starts to erase reality.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm super stoked about this. Super stoked that you all are here, and I'm curious if anyone that's listening and tuning in, if you have any questions for us, we're happy to take whatever you got. How do you want to steer this conversation?
Emmy, is it Emmy? Is that their name?
Yeah, Emily, my cousin.
Emily. Okay,
yeah,
Emily.
Hi.
Yes. Yeah. We're used to being in our head, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, which is part of our body, and also. That's a big point. We can definitely. Oh my God, we could talk about that all day. Yeah, that separation, unfortunately.
Yeah, and like, well, so what are some tools that are helpful for you to go from like being in the mind into being in the body?
I mean, one of the things that I engage with every fucking day in my home is a dear friend, indigenous two-spirit person, gave me some sweetgrass braided that they had grown from their mother's sweetgrass that they braided for me. And that is on my altar, and I engage with it every day in some way. I'm not burning it every day, or it would be gone.
Yeah.
But I engage with it every day, and part of my engagement with it is it's a braid of 3 strands. And back to that sacred number 3, and I think of it as mind, body, and heart, and that connection. And when we're standing in our full weave of those, we get to model that for others. We get to hold for others more easily because we have more resourcing, and we're stronger with that braid than single strands. So I would say, just to start, having a daily practice of like literally putting it in my viewpoint of engagement, and touching it and being like, right, connection, like to self, as well as like, individuals, community, and spirituality, having these things, you know, however you define that, whatever, it doesn't matter to me, but the weave. So
I appreciate that.
It reminds me, bring it all together.
Yeah, and it's like that's the same with like the mind, body, spirit connection, right? That triad. So I mean, I really like focusing on these three items and like having that weave happening. And I love that you brought in the sweetgrass braid, and you get to get in contact with that every day. That's beautiful in your practice. But I'm like, my mind is going into, when you talked about the sacred geometry before, I'm just like, I get my body response is like, yes, please. Okay, so what are some amazing patterns we can look at? And I also am thinking about that, like bringing in that threefold, into the daily reflection. I think I'm doing it automatically, but I think that it would be nice to kind of have it more present and externalized. Appreciate that.
weaving for me is really a huge part of that. It's not something I do every day, but it's a practice I keep coming back to. That when I'm doing it, is such a constant reminder of the importance of being woven with others. And that means, whether that's multiple parts in myself, if you're into IFS, or, with loved ones, as well as just more broadly community.
We got Rowan's in the house. Hey, Rowan. Hey. Yeah, I love that.
You brought in some beautiful sacred geometry into a shared pleasure practice recently. I'd love for you to talk about that because I think it was brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, that was super fun. Yeah. So should I describe kind of what we did?
Whatever you want.
I'm wondering how to bring this in. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of breath work and guided ecstatic breath practices, and basically up until just about a week ago, they've been very individual. They've been very like inward, very solo journey. And the challenge was with this lovely group of 5 erotic practitioners. Erotic practitioners.
We have our moments of that too.
Yeah, a little bit. How do we go into these journeys, feeling more connected and doing it collectively instead? So like, how do we bring that in? And so the idea that kind of came from all of us that emerged was like, well, how do we position our bodies together so that we are, touching and we are connected while we're breathing? And so we tried out a bunch of different geometric 5-sided geometry with the first one was where we each had our head on another one's belly, so we're kind of like circling in and very close and connected and kind of like just like really beautifully like held. And that's how we started off the practice, feeling for me it was quite grounding and quite also very energizing. So I was like instantly kind of tuned into my body and accessing pleasure right away. So it was quite amazing. And as we kind of found our way like moving outwards, and so we unraveled a little bit, and then we were on one side and had our hands on each other's backs, and so the circle was kind of spreading outwards, and then breathing some more together and noticing, and then we ended up like doing kind of like a starfish where all of our heads were meeting, and then continued breathing until we eventually kind of like found our way swimming outwards into our own space for a bit. And so, but it was just this beautiful like dance of shapes and looking at the different ways that we can create shapes. And I really am excited. Even talking about it now, I'm like tingly because I'm like, oh my God, we have different numbers of people and like what kind of shapes can we create and breathe at the same time. And I mean, there's no other expectation other than to just be present and breathing and noticing what is happening. And it's so juicy. Like I would love for all of you to try that. And so that would be something I would love to do in the real life pleasure practice scene, like come in and play and like see how many people show up and see what kind of geometry we can create. So I would love to nerd out on that, and I would love to prototype new things, and I'm very excited about this collaboration. Like it's actually just been like wow, like there's unlimited possibilities of pleasure and connecting in ways that are, for me, like less threatening, less like scary, like we can start there. We can start in a place that's like, you don't have to be fully explicit, and, we can kind of creep our way in. We can try different things, and there's many ways of accessing pleasure, and just all the varieties. So, yeah.
I love that so much. I just thought it was so awakening. And one thing that I've really struggled with in community pleasure practices that I've been in the last couple of years is how individual they are. Yeah. It's like maybe you leave your camera on, but you turn it away.
Yeah.
Or everyone turns off their camera and their sound. Yeah. And then you're completely disconnected.
Yeah.
And then, maybe you have a quick check-in in the beginning and at the end, but it's like half a saga, like you don't actually get the connection. Yeah. So then it's kind of like, this is actually just kind of an accountability group, which is great. And also, I just want so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a weekly pleasure practice group where we really have more of a checking in and connecting in the beginning.
Yeah.
And we do more connecting in the end. And because it's a group of like 5 people, we all know each other and we have a sense of what's going on in one another's lives. And so there's this like continuation of a thread, and there's text in the week, throughout. And so it's much more of a community unto itself.
Yeah.
And then what I was so happy when I moved into the body sex world out of somatic sex education, and found that like, oh, these are the pleasure practices that I am used to from years ago that I just haven't found in a while, where you're on camera throughout your pleasure practice. I mean, maybe you're brushing your hair, maybe you're jacking off, like whatever you're doing.
Both.
But you're present, and maybe the camera's just on your face, or maybe it's like full frontal on your genitals, like you choose. And everyone is like actually connected throughout, like maybe there's a moment after you've connected, gotten started, where we do some breathing and people get into it and there's a little bit of quiet, and then suddenly you hear like and then you hear and then it just starts kind of going off, and then somebody's laughing, and then other people are cheering, and then somebody comes and people are like, yay, and then somebody's talking about I don't know, something about, let's say, an erotic trauma they've had, and how they're processing that. And someone else is talking about, like, how to raise a boy that's a good feminist, and, like, also encourage his sexuality, and these conversations are happening while other people are still engaged with their bodies. And that to me is the community that I'm looking for. It's like, really though, all these things living together, that feels genuinely organic to me. And it takes a lot of sense of safety to be able to do that. I do want to name, like, there's a lot of work and care that goes into being able to be in those spaces, and also it's breathtaking. So. Normalization of sexuality is just part of this work of being in a body with a vulva in this world. No matter what that vulva looks like we're not trying to talk about. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate this so much, and it leads me to thinking about, like, what is it that creates a container that feels safe enough to go into these places? So what are some things for you that allow you to feel that way?
I'll let you go first.
Okay.
What allows you to feel that way?
Yeah, great. So I think having a shared experience ahead of time is one of the ways. So of course, like being in the different intensives that I've been in, being in those spaces. So whether it's the somatic sex education or the urban tantra, it's you're in there, you're having a journey together, you're on it, you're experiencing that together, and being with those same people, creates like a feeling of safety, some familiarity. So that's one way. I also really like having agreements at the start of a practice. They can be really simple and basic, but there's a shared agreement and there's a willingness to tend to oneself, and there's a willingness to remain confidential so that you're only speaking about your own experience. And there's a few things that I think that are really important that I like to front load and talk about any expectations and that, just so that everybody's on the same page. And so I think that really helps also create that container. I've been working at finding safety within different identities. So I find if I'm in a queer and trans space, that obviously feels safe, and at a time maybe a women's circle would feel safe. Insert whatever language you want for that, but having that shared experience also creates a safety. But I'm really looking at after exploring the erotic potential in the burning communities, where it's there's this notion of radical acceptance where everybody's welcome. And so how do we say that, right, and bring that everyone's welcome into a space, and kind of push on those I guess limitations that I used to have before, and like how do we, allow for like whoever to show up and still feel safe enough? How do we create those containers? And so I'm really curious about that in my work, but I also am focused on creating, queer and trans spaces, because that's where I actually feel I can do more of the deep dive and go inward. So I'm curious about all of those things, and the thing that I want to bring into the world is creating these spaces, these safe enough containers for people like us.
Yeah, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
It's I have such a heart embeddedness, rootedness in queer and trans spaces, and sometimes I feel a lot safer in women's spaces.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's a lot less coddling, and there's just as much holding, should it need be.
Yeah.
And that difference sits very uncomfortably in me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to name that, because it's a big deal for me to feel that difference is unsettling in a way that I want to move towards.
Yeah.
And I want to engage with that unsettling more, and find where my discomforts are, and engage in those conversations, and how to be with that, and how to appreciate the spectrums of both of those.
Yeah.
And coming into this body, the loss of feeling safe and comfortable in women's spaces is a massive heartbreak that I will probably continue to contend with until my last day. Because I've had 40 years, certainly 20 years, very purposefully, of being held in women's spaces, and I can't go to a dance party now, even one that says trans and queer friendly, and it feel comfortable for sure, and sometimes not quite safe. It's surprising how many people feel like they can just reach out and touch me. Emily, managing other people's experiences, instead of allowing them to, pick themselves up and also be there should they need help. But I'm gonna let you chat, and I'm gonna tend to my overbeating heart. I'm still contending with this heartbreak, and and also I will say I insist on continuing to show up in women's spaces, because that's still my Speaking of not managing other people's experiences, like showing up, being like, oh, I know I belong in this space. Other people, however, are going to be challenged to have me in women's spaces. That's just true. So, and I'm grateful that my work in doing that supports trans women. As a trans masculine person, which is its own. Because people assume I'm trans feminine. Consistently, even trans people.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I experienced that with you, and I really appreciate you doing the work of going into women's spaces. I think that you're there. That's for you. It's like there, and it's just so hard with the labeling, and even if it does have like a different labeling, it's still there's that overall feeling. And I think that if what makes it easier, I'm guessing, is like when we do get naked in these spaces and we see like, okay, we all have a vulva, great. like, or, and so, like that can help like kind of equalize the playing field. But I also feel like in the shared erotic spaces, as soon as everybody gets naked, it does the same sort of thing. So even if it's people with penises or vulvas or whatever, like I find that also like seems to like neutralize the space. So I really liked when you said that one of the spaces that you went into like had like a temple space where you had to like disrobe before you go in, and I imagine that like creates that kind of sense of safety also as soon as you enter.
There's shared vulnerability there. For more for some than others, obviously. Like I've been in so many nude spaces in my life. Like I've just lived in them for so long that I'm just like, oh, whatever, But other people do not have that sense of safety and comfort in them. But there is a bit more equalization.
Yeah, I appreciate that. but yeah, I'd love to travel into those spaces, with you. And I just love like what you're bringing, and I think that it's like important that you keep doing it and you keep pushing into it. And I actually like deeply appreciate that you're doing that, and I'm happy to support you on the other side, or on the front of it or whatever, because I think it's so
Well,
important.
and similarly for non-binary bodies,
Yeah.
and gender queer bodies, and like all the things, like it. When I first took my breasts off, I really had a moment of like, oh God, I'm gonna be in solidarity with women and not do the like dude chest thing. And it, there's still times and spaces where I definitely hold that.
Yeah.
But I also had multiple people be like, please show the world that you have a different body and normalize that. That's actually
Yeah.
really important work. And
Yes.
that hit me in a way that I was like, oh, right.
Yeah.
I don't think of my body as different.
Yeah.
I still think of my body as a woman's body
Yeah.
without breasts. Like there
Yeah.
are tons of women in the world without breasts.
Yes.
Like actually, so
Exactly.
yeah, it was helpful. Be like, oh right, that work. I can do both of these works, and I can judge and discern based on time and space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And my approach has been like, since I had my surgery, like I was like topless as often as possible in various events where it was okay. And even though it's like totally fine to be out in public showing your nipples, I still got all kinds of flack doing it. And I was like pushing up against it on the other side. And I was like, once I became comfortable in that, it was fine. But like being usually the only one with, feminized nipples out, and even being at a pride festival in the beer garden and being told like, ma'am, you need to put your shirt back on, and I'm like, I'm in a public park, why? And like it just was interesting to experience that. And so then as soon as I had my surgery, I was like, well, a little bit shy, but like also like, yes, like this is it, like there's such
Free the nipple for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I will do that work. I will keep doing that work. I will show up.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I feel like I even have even more. I have even more freedom, and I actually like I don't have nipples, and it was intentional because I'm just like, yeah, like you can't censor me.
I haven't seen somebody simply take their nipples off their breasts.
Oh my
I would be so delighted. Had I had smaller breasts,
Yeah.
I would have considered. Like I took my breasts off mostly for my back, not for gender.
Yeah.
And I think that if I'd had like A or B and not had the back issues because of the breast, I really would have considered like, okay, but how can you take my nipples off?
Yeah.
So, because I also always had my shirt off every chance I got. So, yeah.
Yeah, flesh tone tattooed nipples, so they just like blend in.
Wipe them off. Take these off, and then over the scar tissue, just
Yeah, I saw one tattoo that was like they pixelated the nipple.
So much.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're so creative.
Right?
You're so creative. Yeah, find your ways to do your work in your own way. I love that.
Yeah.
So happy.
So sweet. I'm just gonna scroll back a bit here. We've got I'm saying the spectrum of gender expression is beautiful. I think finding your own pleasure is key to being open to the pleasure of others. I just want us all to love ourselves. Yeah. That. And more nudism. Absolutely.
Yeah, normalize skin and bodies, whatever they may be, whatever shape, whatever size, whatever ability.
Exactly. And the other comment was also women's bodies need to be seen as non-sexual in their nakedness. Yes.
Oh, I know it's legal here, Emily. I do.
Yeah.
And I've got some, I've got a sweetie friend who, just as a butch dyke, just looks like a dude. And it would be so fun when we would go out and around in Quebec, because we did a lot of like camping and cycling. And both of us would be topless on a beach. And she would walk into the women's restroom and people would be like, whoa, she's got her breast out. I would walk into the women's restroom with long hair and they'd be like, ah. And I was like, it's weird how people decide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy even when it's legal, but I love that it's legal here. It makes me really happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is great that you won't get a ticket for it, but yeah, it's also like still people are
But
self-policing.
socially,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's usually other women policing women, and it's
So
just like, what the
often.
fuck?
Oh, yeah. Well, use of the master's tools.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
we've been taught is control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and comparative thinking.
Yeah.
So here we go,
Yeah.
swimming in our own waters.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So are we going to keep chatting till 1? Is this the what was our time limit? I don't know.
Yeah, I think taking 2 minutes to
Okay.
circle back.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I am deeply appreciating this time with you, and I'm actually hoping that we can do another one, at some point, because this has felt really good to have this conversation, and maybe next time we can have more joiners and more questions. So
Awesome.
I'm wondering if that's something you'd be interested in doing.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, thanks for everyone who was so chatty. So Emily really was like here with us.
Yeah.
Right here. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes it really special when people engage with us. So appreciate that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes a difference. Mm-hmm. I know so many people watch lives after the fact.
Yeah.
And I love getting the DMs later, but it really does make for a different environment when people engage in the moment. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if anything comes up, so if you're watching this later and you have questions, I think it's great that you direct message either Ro or myself, or both of us. Love your feedback, love whatever. If you have topics you want us to talk about, poke into our pages, check out our website, see what we're up to, and then let's
poke into our pages. Yes, please poke into my pages.
You could take the backdoor entry.
As a bibliophile, that one really hit.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been really great, Ro. Thanks for sharing your experiences with pleasure and other sensations.
Thanks for inviting me into this. Yeah, it's been brilliant. Love it. So happy to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.